Daisy Duck had just finished putting the finishing touches onto enormous, golden brown apple pies, and she placed them on the windowsill to cool. The scent of cinnamon and warm apples wafted through the crisp air, making Donald and his nephew's stomachs growl in anticipation. They'd been outside playing in the snow, and nothing seemed more perfect than pie with a scoop of vanilla ice cream to top it off. Meanwhile, Uncle Scrooge McDuck was trudging along the road, his mind preoccupied with thoughts of his vast fortune. He had been counting his gold coins all day, ensuring that no thief or robber would make off with any of it. As he walked down the street, something made him uneasy. He felt the prickling sensation that someone was following him. Quickly, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a mirror, carefully glancing into it. His suspicions were confirmed. He saw the reflections of the 3 Beagle Boys creeping behind him, hoping to catch him unawares. Double quotes. Well, Uncle Scrooge muttered, tightening his grip on his bag of coins. He had a plan to get out of this situation, but first, he needed to lose them. With remarkable agility for an old duck, Uncle Scrooge dashed down an alley, slipped through a fence, and landed in Daisy's backyard with a soft thud. He looked around and noticed the 2 pies cooling on the windowsill. An idea popped into his head. "I can't let those Beagle Boys get the best of me," Scrooge whispered to himself. "But a little mischief of my own could turn the tables." In the blink of an eye, Uncle Scrooge grabbed the top of one pie, swiftly removed the pastry lid, and dumped out the apples and cinnamon filling. Without hesitation, he filled the pie with his glittering gold coins. Then he carefully placed the pastry lid back on, making sure it looked exactly as it had before, and tiptoed back toward the fence. Just as he was about to escape, he noticed the Beagle Boys approaching, their eyes narrowed, and their movements slow as they sniffed the air. "Where'd he go?" the first Beagle Boy muttered, scratching his head. "The old miser's gotta be nearby. Let's go check that yard." Uncle Scrooge ducked behind a nearby tree, his heart pounding in his chest. As the Beagle Boys approached the bag he had discarded, he held his breath. The boys picked it up, shaking it to see if any treasure remained inside. He must have hidden the money in Daisy's yard. One of the boys grunted. "I bet it's buried under all the snow," the second one suggested, his shovel scraping against the ground. "We'll find it. No sweat," the third Beagle Boy snickered. The Beagle Boys, clearly used to trouble, took brooms and shovels from Daisy's shed and started to dig and sweep with enthusiasm. Uncle Scrooge, watching from behind the tree, couldn't help but let out a quiet chuckle. It's always a pleasure to watch these ruffians work hard for something they'll never find, Scrooge muttered to himself, amused by their determination. But after a few more minutes of futile digging, the Beagle Boys began to grow tired. The snow was heavy, and there were no coins in sight. Whose idea was it to dig up snow? The first Beagle Boy complained, "I'm starting to think the old miser's just carrying the gold in his pockets," grumbled the second boy. Double quotes. "Well, let's call it quits," the third Beagle Boy muttered. "I'm tired of digging and freezing my tail off." As they turned to leave, Daisy peeked out the window and saw the Beagle Boys standing in her yard, their faces red from the cold, but looking awfully pleased with themselves. Her heart swelled with gratitude. "What kind-hearted fellows!" Daisy exclaimed, clapping her hands together. "They've really turned over a new leaf. I think they deserve a reward for their hard work. Double quotes. Without giving it a second thought, Daisy called out, "Cooey! Thank you, Beagle Boys. Please take a pie as a reward." The Beagle Boys exchanged confused glances but smiled politely, delighted by the unexpected generosity. "Gee, thanks, Daisy," they said in unison. Uncle Scrooge, still hidden behind the tree, heard Daisy's call and his face turned crimson. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He dashed into the yard before the Beagle Boys could grab the pie. Double quotes. "No, no, don't give them that pie," he shouted, his voice frantic. He ran to Daisy's side and grabbed her arm. "You don't understand. Daisy, that pie, it's mine." His eyes narrowed as he pointed to the pie the Beagle Boys were holding. "That's the one with the gold." Daisy, who had not yet realized what had happened, frowned at Uncle Scrooge. "Really, Uncle Scrooge, you're being awfully rude. The Beagle Boys worked hard. They deserve a treat." She placed the second pie in Uncle Scrooge's hands, giving him a playful wink. "If you're too mean to buy yourself a pie, you can have this one." Scrooge, his face turning purple with rage, shoved the pie aside. "No, I want that one." He pointed again at the pie in the Beagle Boy's hands. "That's the one with my gold." The Beagle Boys, already halfway across the yard, began to mutter among themselves. "It's very fishy," the first Beagle Boy remarked, glancing over his shoulder. Scrooge McDuck's way too interested in that pie. "You think it's full of treasure?" The second Beagle Boy wondered aloud. "Only one way to find out," the third Beagle Boy said, and with a swift movement, he ripped off the top of the pie. The sight of gold coins spilling out from the pie shocked everyone. The Beagle Boys' eyes grew wide with greed. Double quotes. "Gold, gold, gold." They whooped, grabbing the coins and running off, their voices echoing through the yard. Uncle Scrooge was speechless for a moment, shaking with fury. But Daisy, completely unaware of the situation, thought he was just cold. "Do come inside and warm up by the fire, Uncle Scrooge," she said, her voice full of concern. But Scrooge was beyond reasoning. He threw the empty pie to the ground in disgust and stomped off, muttering angrily to himself as he made his way back to his mansion. The Beagle Boys, meanwhile, had made it just far enough down the street when they were stopped by Officer McSnack, the local policeman. "Freeze!" Officer McSnack shouted, standing tall with his baton raised. Well, what do we have here?" "Looks like some sticky finger crooks who got a little too excited about pie." The Beagle Boys gulped in unison. "Lo," they muttered, realizing they had been caught red-handed. The next morning, Duckburg was buzzing with news of the great pie caper. Headlines screamed, "Beagle Boys busted in bizarre pie heist." Daisy, who had still not fully pieced together the mystery, chuckled as she served the last of the apple pie to Donald and his nephews. "I must remember that Uncle Scrooge just doesn't like apple pie," she said, shaking her head. Donald, laughing as he dug into his slice, grinned. "Either that, or he's just terrible at sharing his dough." Meanwhile, back at McDuck Manor, Scrooge sat fuming in his office, clutching the morning newspaper. His face was red with frustration. "I'll never trust a pie again," he grumbled. "That's the last time I hide my golden pastry." But just as Scrooge reached for his sandwich in the kitchen later that day, he froze. Wait a minute. He carefully peeled back the bread, inspecting it for hidden surprises. Meanwhile, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, already planning their next adventure, looked at each other and smirked. "Next time we want a new bike," Huey whispered. "Let's just hide it in a cave." The Beagle Boys, still locked up in their jail cell, complained about their misfortune. Next time, one of them muttered, "We're sticking to good old-fashioned robbery. No more pastries." And back at Daisy's house, Donald and his nephews finished off the last crumbs of pie. Louie grinned. "Aunt Daisy, maybe next time you should bake a cake instead. Double quotes. Daisy laughed and shook her head. "Fine, but I'm checking it for gold first."